What's up, creepers and geekers? Chris the Atari Creep here, and I've been neglecting the gaming part of this channel as of late, and for that I apologize for you folks that come here for that. But I just go where the wind tells me to go. If I feel like fucking up a controller, that's where I go, and I apologize for that. Making a lightsaber, check that out. I was pretty happy with how that came out. But long story short, I want to talk about the Sony PlayStation. The original, and why I feel, well, first of all, personally to me, it's beloved. Why it was so important, and why I feel that it doesn't get the credit it deserves. Yes, there are tons of people out there who love the original Sony PlayStation, but much like anything aside from Nintendo, you don't really see a lot out there, or hear a lot out there, rather. Yes, you could search YouTube for videos, and there's probably a ton of videos on the console, but I think that's mainly only because of time. Over time, enough has come up, so it looks like it's getting the love, but it really doesn't get the spotlight I feel it deserves, personally. I want to talk to you and tell you why I feel it is not only important, but why it's so special to me. But before we do that, we need to go back in time and talk 1985. A specific console comes out from this little-known company here in North America called Nintendo. They released a Nintendo Entertainment System, blah, blah, blah. You know the history. This thing takes off like a fucking juggernaut. And that's the only word I can use for it. Juggernaut. It dominated. It took over the entire culture as far as kids were concerned. It was everywhere. It was everywhere. It was in film, TV, commercials. It was in your face. And because of their, name recognition, you would call it, they were able to hang on to a very illegal third-party stranglehold on game developers, which is important to get to here. And they just trucked along for years. No one really came close to competing with them. Sega tried, and though in Europe and out of North America, they did very well with the Master System, here in the States, the only reason I knew the Master System existed is because my friend just happened to have one. Never even heard of it until I walked into his basement, and there it was with a stack full of games that he had gotten for Christmas. And I enjoyed it. Never even heard of Sega until then, other than certain arcade games. So, Nintendo's trucking along, and the Sega decides to release its 16-bit console, the Genesis, to Mega Drive over out of the North American region. And this fairly did well. It competed very heavily with it. But I feel the only reason it took some of those Nintendoites away was because it was a more powerful unit than everyone's 8-bit console. This thing was 16-bit and the 8-bit and whatever. But that being said, there was still a vast majority of people still hanging on to their 8-bit console and just waiting for their Nintendo counterpart to come along. And wait, they did for a couple of years. And then finally Nintendo does release the SNES, the Super Nintendo. And it outshined Genesis on a technical standpoint in almost every aspect with the exception of one. And, Sega decided to exploit that and call it blast processing, which, somewhere in my little heart, I'm going to consider a real thing. But I digress. So you could see that Sega, aside from, yes, they had the 16-bit console, and that's probably why they were doing as well as they were versus the 8-bit console. Now that this SNES is out, they're starting to struggle a little bit. Nintendo still has that stranglehold on third-party developers. Nintendo is still dominating the market, and the Super Nintendo takes off just as much as the NES did. The only one thing that really hurt the SNES is a lot of parents were like, well, don't you already have a Nintendo? This is just Nintendo's way of trying to steal money from people, blah, 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 blah. The gaming industry was new, and how it works hadn't been truly established yet as far as more powerful systems coming out after so many years of another system's life. And if you look back at Atari's past, it didn't work out too well to begin with. So people were still kind of burnt on that, though they were satisfied with the Nintendo brand and they had faith in it. They still didn't want to dish out the money. But regardless of all that, it still took off. And you could start to see its ripple effects within the Sega organization. Right around that time, they came out with the Sega CD. And then they came out with the 32X. So you could see them trying to hold on to that stronghold, so to speak. And they didn't really have a stronghold, but their share of the marketplace and trying to expand it out and take away from Nintendo. But it just couldn't happen. So it's very important to understand this because Nintendo had such a name, such a recognition, such a following, that it's very important that something like the Sony PlayStation came out. And so I suppose we should talk about that now, since this video is about the Sony PlayStation. Fairly well documented, but I feel it's needed to be said here. Nintendo on the side says, you know what? There might be something to this CD-based technology. And if you look at the CD-based technology, it makes sense in a lot of ways. Though it's funny that they're going back to little cartridges now. I just wanted to point that out as a side note. But think about it. CDs, they're cheaper to produce. They hold vast amounts more information. And it just seems on a financial level, it makes more sense. So they reached out to the pioneers of the CD industry, Sony. And I may be wrong in this. Go ahead and correct me if I'm not. But if I remember correctly, Sony still kind of had a patent on CD technology. I don't know about that. At least they were the leaders. And that's why I believe Nintendo went to Sony, because they were a big name. They were recognized for this technology. If you remember in the 80s, Sony, outside of video games, dominated everything. They dominated TVs. They dominated stereos. Walkman, come on. The fucking Sony Walkman. So Nintendo reached out to them and said, we would like to make a CD add-on for our Super Nintendo. Now, in speculation, I think it was more of a, well, Sega did it. We need to stay up on them just in case. But I want to do it better. So that's why they branched out instead of did it internally. Because it probably would have taken years for them to do it internally. So they do that. Sony starts producing this thing called the Nintendo PlayStation to add on to it. And we've all seen it in the past year. There's actually a prototype console. It's an all-in-one that came out. And so everything seemed pretty good. But then Nintendo just started being Nintendo, thinking, well, we're the kings and we can just demand anything we want. And long story short, you can look it up what exactly happened. They pulled away from Sony and secretly went over to Philips to have them do something. So Sony, of course, didn't like this. So they were just like, you know what? Fuck you, Nintendo. You think you're a tough guy, huh? You think you're a tough guy? You want to step up? You're going to get knocked down. And they came up with this sexy motherfucker. This bad boy right here. Now, I had heard of it. Didn't buy one right away. The last console I purchased before this was the Sega Genesis, and I was fairly happy with that. I've had very limited Super Nintendo experience aside from certain people's houses here and there. I still have my NES. Actually, no. Technically, I didn't. My mom had my NES and played Dr. Mario. She bought it all on her own. God bless her. Bought Dr. Mario, took my Nintendo down to the parlor, as we call it here, like the little TV den room, and played Dr. Mario all the time on the thing. But it's important to note this because around this time period, video games kind of fizzled away from me. I was, a young adult, late teen. I was really, long hair, getting into the whole, I'm going to be a fucking rock star. And I was all about partying, making metal music, and getting laid. I mean, it's really just that simple. I can't even fluff that up anyway. That's all that I cared about. And once in a while, I'd pick up my little controller, for my Genesis. So fast forward, I believe it was about a year, maybe even 2 years in the PlayStation's life. Again, I'd heard of it, and it just seemed like, whatever. But I just happened to be at a friend's house. And her boyfriend was over, and he had this gray controller in his hand, and he was playing this game called Resident Evil. So I watched it for a little while, and I was just blown away. I was like, wow. My Genesis was great. Don't get me wrong. I still love it. It's my favorite console to this date of all time. But this really blew my balls right off of my fucking body. So when he was somewhat done playing it, guess what? I took it over for 2 fucking days. I never left there. I had food delivered. I think I took bathroom breaks, a couple of naps here and there, and they were okay with that. I played Resident Evil straight through and beat it twice. And then he pulled out, and this was the creme de la creme, the accoutrement, the que le será este con la salsa. That's gibberish. The new Castlevania game that he had literally just purchased. Symphony of the Night. And holy shit, was I blown the fuck away. I popped this thing in, and I played it as much as I could. Of course, it was a new game to him, so I didn't get too much time on it. It's neither here nor there for right now. Shortly after that, a friend of ours brought over another game called Blood Omen, Legacy of Kain. And again, my mind was blown. It might have been in different order. I think, actually, now thinking about it, Castlevania was after Blood Omen. But just that intro to Blood Omen, right there, boom, I was hooked. And we have this little place here in the town I grew up in, Melrose, called Hunt's. It used to be called Hunt's Electronics. It's next to a Friendly's restaurant, which is no longer there, that I had worked at the time as a teenager. And I walked my happy ass in there with my $210 or whatever it was with tax, and I picked up a Sony PlayStation. I brought it home. I went to Child World up on Route 1, and I bought a couple games for it. Of course, I bought Blood Omen. I bought the Resident Evil, and I think I bought Spyro. I mean, I went hog wild with this thing. And it actually reinvigorated my love for playing video games. It was just everything about it. The console just looked really cool and modern. To this day, I still think it's one of the nicest looking consoles. I don't care what you say. Yeah, the CD technology had its little glitches because they were CDs. But for the most part, I mean, it was just amazing what I could do in these games. Yeah, there was some bum games because it was a new technology. But the games I really engrossed myself in, going down the line, Blasto, Spyro, the Lion King game. Oh my God. My now ex-wife and my youngest daughter, we used to play that game all the time. And then one day, now mind you, at this point I had employees, came to me with a game and said, Chris, I played this for 20 minutes. It made me shit my pants. Thought of you the whole time. Borrow for as long as you want. I had that game for almost 2 years. And that game was Silent Hill. And that was the big game changer for me. I could finally get my horror and my games into one. Yes, we had Resident Evil. Yes, Blood Omen was kind of horror-based. But Silent Hill was the one that really did it for me. So needless to say, I fell deeply in love with the PlayStation. Not to say that my Genesis didn't get any love at all, but the PlayStation was the focal point. The Genesis was put in a box somewhere and put away. PlayStation was stuck to the TV for many years. And it's my understanding that my ex-wife still has my original PlayStation and a handful of my games. And my daughters have been playing it on and off. I don't know if they still do to this day, but in a conversation some time ago, she had mentioned that they still play it along with the PlayStation 2. Now, the one thing that really bothers me about the original PlayStation, again, it doesn't get as much talk as I feel it needs to get. And maybe that's a good thing, you know. I usually hear people talk about the PS2, which I did get excited about at launch. And, of course, recently the PlayStation 4. But the PlayStation 1, you got to really look at it from its specific time period. Look at what it did. It took a juggernaut and destroyed it, if you ask me. I mean, yeah, Nintendo carried on. And ironically, with the same old technology of cartridges in their next system. But they were the first true competitors. They were the ones that sucked away those third-party developers. That was the first time you saw a Castlevania game on something other than Nintendo. That was the first time you saw a Final Fantasy, not that I was into those, on any other system but Nintendo. And there was a handful to come. Mega Man. It just blew me away that this one company stood up to a king and knocked it down. David and Goliath. And I honestly believe that the only reason it happened was because they felt butthurt about their deal with Nintendo. And they just said, fuck you. Okay, fine. Watch what happens. We're the biggest electronics company in the world. Everyone loves our shit. This is the only thing we don't do. Now we do it. F you, Nintendo. Not to say I don't love Nintendo. I know this is going to sound like a big hate rant against Nintendo. Because I do love my NES. I do enjoy my SNES as a guilty pleasure. But the Sony PlayStation, to me, is where it's really at. I normally do not do CD-based gaming. And to give you another scale of the whole thing, I kind of walked away from my favorite, Sega, to play the Sony PlayStation. And that's how big it was to the creep. And lastly, this box right here, not this specific box, was the very last brand new console I have purchased to date. Way back when. So that's it, guys. I just wanted to show some love for the Sony PlayStation and explain to you why I feel it's important in the industry and it's important to our hobby and important to the history of video gaming in general. David and Goliath, they took down a giant, and they've been trucking along ever since. And if you look at Nintendo, though, still doing very well. They're scrambling. Every new console, they're scrambling. So, thank you so much for listening to this. I hope everyone is doing well. Thank you for your patience as far as the lack of gaming content on here. I have 2 more videos I got planned that are gaming related. And hopefully they'll be out within the next week, at least one of them. I'm really excited about. And that's it. So, again, I hope everyone's doing well. Please leave feedback, positive or negative. It's all positive to me. And until next time, guys, take care. Bye-bye.
Hey, what's up, folks? The Creep here. Thank you, as always, so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe for more. You can follow The Creep on social media, and feel free to reach out at any time here on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Creep would love to hear from you. And as always, thank you, take care, and bye-bye.